The Basics of Bitcoins and Blockchains, an introduction to cryptocurrencies and the technology that powers them. This book was written by Antony Lewis and was published by Mango Publishing 2021. Once you have read this very user-friendly 4-books analysis, you will understand the key vocabulary used in the world of cryptocurrencies, and you will know all about the digital currency market developed. You will be able to rethink the role of Bitcoin and Ethereum and see the future of currency from a broader perspective. To get the most out of this analysis, it is a good idea to familiarize ourselves with the author's background. Antony Lewis is a cryptocurrency expert who wrote the introductory manual, The Basics of Bitcoins and Blockchains. In 2013, he left a stable career in the banking sector, where he worked at Credit Suisse and Barclays Capital, to create Itbit, a Bitcoin exchange platform and one of the first startups in the sector to be financed by large venture capital companies. In 2015, he began to operate as a crypto consultant, and in 2016, he became the director of research for R3's Lab and Research Center in Singapore. Ethereum Blockchain Token. If we want to understand the world of cryptocurrency, where do we start? Cryptocurrencies have completely changed the financial sector, as well as the perception and expectations people have of the entities that define its parameters, from banks to governments. In just a few years, cryptocurrencies have become seriously trendy, and words like NFT, Ethereum, and wallet have found a place in everyday finance jargon. It is said that these currencies are available to everyone, yet there is not much information available about them, and people's general understanding is still somewhat limited. Antony Lewis aims to fill this void with this general handbook which explains all the main points you need to know. To discuss any aspect of cryptocurrency, you need to know the key terminology, and you must understand it inside out. The term cryptocurrency refers to any digital currency created by software, according to a well-defined set of processes and rules. Bitcoin and Ether are two of the most famous cryptocurrencies and are based on a technology, or rather a set of technologies, called the blockchain. The connection between currency and blockchain is simple. A Bitcoin, for example, is a set of protocols expressed in the form of computer code, which defines its technical characteristics. A software program uses the code to operate the protocols, allowing the creation of blocks of data that form the blockchain. The money is produced as part of this process through a very precise elaboration of the blockchain data, which also plays a crucial role in keeping track of transactions, and it is through this very detailed data processing that the blocks are created. The operating model of the blockchain defines the parameter of its use. There are several operating models, including Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ether is its currency, and each of them has unique characteristics. To understand exactly how currency is created and why it is given a value, we need to dive into economic theory to understand how money works. What is a currency, and why are cryptocurrencies the future of money? Money is defined as an instrument that performs 3 functions. These are medium of exchange, i.e. a practical instrument for making payments, a store of value, something to be held with the guarantee that it will have value in the future, and a unit of account, to compare the difference in value between 2 objects or assets in a clear manner and according to standard parameters. Each type of currency and related asset has its own advantages and disadvantages. Cash, for example, is not a good store of value due to inflation. $1,000 kept under the mattress in the 1980s is now worth much less than it was then. It would have been better to invest that money in the bank. Physical money does undoubtedly have one quality. It can be controlled through material possession. At the same time, however, it does not work when distance is involved. Fortunately, virtual money takes care of this. Digital money, on the other hand, differs from physical money because in order to be used, it needs third parties who are authorized to manage it. So what is the advantage of cryptocurrencies, and how do they differ from what we think of as real money? Cryptocurrencies combine the advantages of physical and digital money, with some interesting nuances in the primary functions they can perform. The use of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange is still not very widespread, as it simply isn't practical, at least not yet. By contrast, it has performed very well as a store of value, on a par with gold for its future potential. As a unit of account, however, it failed on all counts due to high price volatility in the markets, with one exception: its value relative to other cryptocurrencies. As mentioned, however, the real advantage of cryptocurrencies is that it gives us direct control over our assets without the possible intervention of external interference. Contrary to popular belief, traditional currencies such as the euro or the dollar have no intrinsic value. These are called fiat currencies and are simply the latest development in money's long history, which began with bartering and then moved on to representative currency, which were credit notes. The existence of fiat currencies is justified purely by the existence of a legal system which certifies their value and which are primarily used to pay taxes in that particular country. Nothing prevents other forms of money from being used for transactions in the future. On the other hand, the value of a currency is pegged to a value simply to ensure a manageable equilibrium between market supply and demand. Pegging the value of an apple to that of an orange is dependent upon having the right reserve of apples to match the oranges in circulation. George Soros, for example, managed to exploit an excessive valuation of the pound by sending the Bank of England into a tailspin in 1992. Digital money transfers may appear to be a simple, one-sided process, but they require the presence of various third parties. In particular, each bank maintains specific relationships with other banks, especially with the central bank, with which it has an account to access its money reserve. In some countries, not all banks can have accounts with the central bank. In the case of international transfers, things can even get more complicated, bearing in mind that payments involving two currencies require subjects who act as intermediaries for the sale. Furthermore, each movement of money has to be done according to special protocols. It is commonly thought that banks print and move money from one customer account to another. They don't do either of these things. Banks create money in the form of deposits to issue loans. The cryptographic process behind the blockchain is what allows it to function automatically in complete safety. Understanding cryptocurrencies and the blockchain also includes some basic concepts of cryptography, a branch of applied mathematics. Encrypting content requires coding and decoding procedures. For coding, readable text is transformed into an encrypted code which can then be deciphered using a key that derives, in part, from the first step. If the key were to carry out both operations at the time, it would be known as symmetric encryption. But the blockchain uses asymmetric encryption, i.e. there are two separate keys which are mathematically connected to each other. In this type of encryption, there is a public key that can be used to send messages and a private one that only its owner can use. The code you create to carry out a Bitcoin transaction comes from the public key, while access to personal details and your assets comes from the private key. Blockchain codes are called hashes and are the result of an algorithmic coding that transforms data into an encrypted result. This precise type of hash has some special characteristics, including the fact that it is easily subject to modification if there is even a slight change in the message, and that it is impossible for two messages to exist with the same hash value. There are just two reasons, among others, why it is not possible to go back in the data flow to modify its content. These remain unchanged on the blockchain and present certification of not having been modified. The cryptographic hash function thus also becomes useful for identifying single transactions for the mining process, extraction of currencies, and for the identification of blocks. The cryptographic process in which you combine a message with your private key is the reason why the digital signature is an incredibly secure tool and why it becomes the key card for authentication of transactions. Analyzing the common traits and differences between Ethereum and Bitcoin blockchains is essential to understand their main end uses. Bitcoin is undoubtedly the most famous cryptocurrency of all. It is a digital asset whose ownership is written in an electronic register, the blockchain, which is constantly updated by all the computers connected to it. This ensures constant and total transparency of all the transactions carried out. The story of how its value multiplied exponentially in just a few years is well known. The revolutionary model it introduced is much less known. Its open source code, still presented on GitHub, was created specifically to create a system that cannot be censored. The need for administrators and controllers both to create accounts and execute transactions has been completely removed. The model is very close to the peer-to-peer one. In fact, the name Bitcoin derives from the famous BitTorrent network and should be analyzed according to the various problems to which it seeks to find a solution. The order of the transactions is managed through the creation of blocks. Therefore, instead of processing single operations, we are opting for large data packets capable of safely keeping track of the process. The creation of these blocks has also been reserved for the community by means of a method called proof of work. All aspiring creators must play a calculation game so that you only succeed in creating a block if certain random conditions are met in the production of the hash codes. It is not a mathematically complex process, but it takes time. The block production process is called mining, and the monetary reward is the incentive that drives users to carry it out. Processing transactions allows you to obtain a percentage of the commission, and the first transaction of a new block creates bitcoins. At the moment, mining requires massive quantities of electricity and takes place mainly in special farms managed by companies that have access to affordable energy, such as in China. The protocol of a blockchain like Bitcoin, therefore, can be defined as decentralized, because it does not need to rely on hierarchical systems which have historically been shown to be somewhat unstable. Here are a few more useful things to know about cryptocurrency. Bitcoins are not stored in wallets. Their ownership is registered on the blockchain. Their value is determined by market demand. When Bitcoin was first created, it was decided how many coins would be placed in circulation, and once all the foreseen units have been produced, that number cannot be exceeded. Trading in small quantities can be carried out on exchanges, which are special platforms. The Ethereum blockchain has introduced new functions, which is why it is so popular. The basic mechanism of how the protocol handles and tracks transactions is the same, with one small difference. Transactions contain a greater variety of data. The surplus was also designed to fulfill the function of creating so-called smart contracts, real digital contracts that can be used for any type of asset, in particular NFTs. The Ethereum code has also been programmed for the creation of private networks, which is particularly useful in business and systems design environments. A further innovation currently underway is to replace proof-of-work mining with proof-of-stake mining, which is more sustainable and based on the creation of blocks proportional to the amount of ether held, based on the model of bank interest. Finally, the Ethereum blockchain processes data faster than the Bitcoin one. Tradable tokens, NFTs, brand tokens. There are many types of tokens, but what exactly are they? The generic term digital token is often used to talk about cryptocurrencies. Although the term works from a practical point of view, it is more appropriate to make a subdivision between cryptocurrencies, i.e. Bitcoin, Ether and others, and actual tokens, thus defining the whole as a crypto asset. Actual tokens are divided into fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens, and these have very different functions. Tradable tokens are similar to cryptocurrencies except that they do not have their own blockchain, while non-tradable tokens, NFTs, mainly act as a certificate of ownership, the use of which has become popular in the art world. Most of the tokens are developed on the Ethereum blockchain and are highly promising due to their wide application, so much so that people have already begun to talk in terms of tokenomics to define the token economy. Creating tokens is relatively easy, and they can become the means by which to manage the internal economy and the growth of a small community, such as providing extra value to the biggest fans of a given brand or for the creation of new projects. ICOs, initial coin offerings, are in fact a form of fundraising based on the creation of tokens with a strong media impact and great functionality. Traditional methods of raising funds, such as borrowing and capital increases, have been replaced with a campaign similar to crowdfunding. The company describes a product or service, and interested investors buy tokens with the promise of having priority access to it, or other special benefits. Clearly specifying the project's objective is essential to the success of an ICO, as is the investment amount that the company expects to raise. Given their wide variety of uses, there are many different types of tokens, such as asset-backed tokens, which are linked to the ownership of a real asset, and utility tokens, which are used to access services created by the issuer of the token. There are also platform tokens and brand tokens. The value of tokens is based on the same supply and demand dynamics that regulate the classic cryptocurrency market, including all the main causes of price fluctuations, whether positive or negative, including web gossip, current sentiment, technical successes, celebrity endorsements, and manipulation by people who own them in particularly large quantities. Blockchain still has a lot to offer the business world. The blockchain is therefore an innovation with great potential, and in terms of what can be achieved, cryptocurrencies are just the tip of the iceberg. Technically speaking, the blockchain falls into the category of distributed ledgers, and its rules and standards are defined by using various forms of conceptually similar technologies. As it is a form of register, it works in a similar way to a database, with the following characteristics. It keeps track of each type of data and its changes. It keeps real-time data sharing open anywhere on the network. It works within a peer-to-peer structure, and so is not based on a client-service-provider relationship. It is based on a cryptographic system capable of guaranteeing certificates of ownership. It is therefore a database that uses a package of technologies to make external manual intervention redundant. To date, public blockchains have been successfully adopted in trading, international payments, and ICOs. Private blockchains, on the other hand, have been used successfully in intercompany communication, in data duplication processes, and in the development of supply chain management systems. The future of entrepreneurship, from companies in the agri-food sector to fashion or retail, will no doubt transition through to blockchain and cryptocurrency innovations, thereby boosting international market interactions and promoting greater creative potential from a design point of view. The real revolution, however, will mainly be generated by the diffusion of a new, independent monetary system, free of national borders and outside the confines of censorship. Quotes: Bitcoin is the very first digital asset of value that can be transferred over the internet without any specific third party having to approve the transaction of being able to deny it. The vision of Ethereum is to create an unstoppable, censorship-resistant, self-sustaining, decentralized world computer. Different blockchains have different characteristics. Nowadays, it is almost impossible to make a general statement about blockchain without being wrong for some particular example. Take-home message: cryptocurrencies are a type of digital asset that have the same function as money in that they are a payment method, a unit of account, and a way to store value. Essentially, they are made up of a set of data recorded on a blockchain, a network managed by a protocol that keeps track of all transactions with its own encrypted register, and with a completely flat hierarchy, since it is made up of the actual users. Bitcoin and Ethereum are the most famous blockchains and have been the cause of major innovation in the financial world, with the creation of assets that cannot be handled by anyone other than their owner. There are also other similar forms of assets called tokens, divided into fungible, tradable assets just like currencies but in more restricted markets, and NFTs, which act as certificates of ownership. It is important to keep in mind that the value of cryptocurrencies and tokens is defined by the logic of supply and demand, and that their creation, which consists of data calculation processes, takes place in very specific quantities established by the standards that their creator chose to impose.